Hey, everybody. It is Thursday, September 25th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And we just want you to know that you can celebrate one of two things today. It is both National Lobster Day and National Daughters Day, Jill.
Better yet, go have a lobster with your daughter. It's a win-win.
It's a win-win. I'll see you at Red Lobster. Did they file for bankruptcy, right?
Are they still around?
I don't know. Jill, a quick Google shows us there are still 500 plus locations of Red Lobster, despite being in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They're reorganizing over there. So I can see you there. There's a whole variety of specials. Apparently, Jill, it's not only Lobster Day, it's Lobster Week. So there might be a lobster location near you that is offering a deal. Otherwise, it is the Instagram holiday known as National Daughters Day. So if you don't want your daughter to be mad at you and your daughter wants stuff up on the socials, go get that photo up.
Luckily, my daughter is not on the socials, so I am not posting anything.
Yeah, you can't be guilted into it yet. In a couple years. Mom, actually, it might be uncool. Actually, your daughter might want you not to post about them, depending on how they feel about social media.
So I actually was posting something on social media. I was telling a story about something that happened to us. And my daughter, who now reads, was looking over my shoulder and she was like, can't we keep this just private for our family? And I was like, no, but I like where your head's at.
Alpha Gen coming in strong.
At 6 years old, she already understands privacy and not sharing everything. So I appreciated it. Okay, Moshe, tons of headlines, starting with what appears to be yet another politically motivated shooting in this country, this time at an ICE facility in Texas, what we know about the victims and the shooter. Former FBI Director James Comey expected to be indicted.
Jill, it comes just days after President Trump called on his attorney general to start to indict his political enemies. We'll give you the latest on what we think the charges may involve.
Some big news when it comes to the environment. China, the world's largest carbon polluting country, announces a new climate goal.
And what China's saying about the U.S. a day after Trump called climate change a big con.
To the Middle East, a flotilla bound for Gaza with activist Greta Thunberg and others says that it was attacked by drones.
And not just that, Jill. It was also attacked with ABBA music.
Waterloo.
Jill, I think the appropriate song is SOS.
The Labubu craze, not just for kids in toy stores, how luxury brands are getting in on the action. And the MLB, ready to use robot umpires starting in 2026, the reaction. And Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, we'll take you back to West Philadelphia, where someone was born and raised.
On the playground, spending most of his days.
You got it.
Okay, Moshe, starting with what is looking like yet another politically motivated shooting in America. On Wednesday morning, a shooter opened fire on a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in Dallas, killing one detainee and critically injuring two others. The gunman died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The Department of Homeland Security said the shooter opened fire from a nearby rooftop, describing the shooter as a sniper who fired indiscriminately, including at a van in an entrance area where the victims were shot. So this all happened as ICE officers were reportedly transferring detainees into the facility. The victims were shot while they were, quote, inside a law enforcement van. The shooter left behind ammunition with what officials described as anti-ICE language. Investigators suggested that this was a targeted attack aimed at immigration enforcement agents, although no law enforcement agents were actually hurt in the shooting. FBI Director Kash Patel posted an image on social media of ammunition that he said belonged to the shooter. You could see in the photo, one round had the phrase anti-ICE written on it in what appeared to be blue writing. Here is Joshua Johnson, the acting field office director for ICE in Dallas, noting that this was the second attack on one of his facilities in recent months.
This is the second time I've had to stand in front of you and talk about a shooter at one of my facilities. And I think that the takeaway from all of this is that the rhetoric has to stop. There are people out there who are seeing what is being placed online, and they're coming and they're doing acts of violence against ICE employees. So that's kind of all I have for today, is that It's just got to stop. It's dangerous, and people are losing their lives.
So that other shooting that he is talking about happened on July 4th. Nearly a dozen people who had tactical gear and weapons attacked an ICE detention center in Alvarado, Texas. A law enforcement officer was shot in the process. That officer was okay, though. But Moshe, of course, this also comes just a couple of weeks after Charlie Kirk was assassinated in Utah. The assassination attempts on President Trump in the summer of 2024, the killing of the United Healthcare CEO, Brian Thompson, the murder of the Speaker of the House in Minnesota, Melissa Hortman. Sadly, we could go on.
Yeah, unfortunately, we've talked about this extensively, especially in light of the Charlie Kirk murder. The feeling, and we keep seeing it among, young people in their 20s, feeling like the system doesn't work for them, and that violence is the only means to potentially affect change here. It's something that Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas mentioned at the press conference on Wednesday, pleading with lawmakers to turn down the temperature. Here's Ted Cruz.
Violence is wrong. Politically motivated violence is wrong. It was 2 weeks ago today that we saw a political assassination in Utah that tore the heart out of much of this country. This is the third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop. To every politician demanding that ICE agents be doxxed and calling for people to go after their families, stop. This has very real consequences. Look, in America, we disagree. That's fine. That's the democratic process. But your political opponents are not Nazis.
Cruz added, we should not be putting out language there that inspires madmen. Jill, we're also seeing a lot of copycats here, right? Snipers in multiple cases on rooftops, in multiple cases here, writing messages on ammunition. That's something that has been going on for years. I mean, militaries have done it for years. But in terms of assassins here, we saw it with Luigi Mangione. We saw it again with the killer of Charlie Kirk. And now we saw it again with the ICE shooting yesterday. Now, at the same time, I'll mention a number of you skeptical of some of the details that have eked out yesterday. It is very abnormal for an FBI director to be tweeting out evidence just hours after a crime, for prominent politicians and leaders like the vice president to be making accusations within minutes of a shooting taking place. But again, this is not your average administration. Kash Patel was a podcaster and spent a lot of time on social media. So in the past, FBI directors, especially since they're conducting investigations, they potentially have to find other suspects, get to the bottom of things. They don't tweet out evidence in real time. But Patel did that with the photo he tweeted yesterday of the bullet casing. Now, of course, the culprit here, the suspect, is dead. So there's not much of a trial here, but that assumes, of course, he acted alone and no one else was involved here. So some of you are saying, it's a little too convenient that, he wrote anti-ICE on one casing and they only found it after he was dead. And given what's unfolded here in the past couple of weeks, I understand people's reason for skepticism. But ultimately, we're just going to give you what we know and what we're learning from authorities here. And note that the vast majority of people in the FBI, in law enforcement, are not political appointees. They typically just want to get at the truth of the matter and ensure that they're effectively investigating crimes here. As for this ICE facility in Dallas, it's a field office typically used to process detainees after they have been arrested, but before they've been taken to a long-term detention facility. More than 8,000 people have passed through this particular building since Trump took office earlier this year. It's in a commercial area in northwestern Dallas, just outside Dallas Love Field. The authorities here believe that he was actually trying to get at law enforcement officers, even though all of the wounded and the dead individual all happen to be migrants who are being processed and happen to be outside the building. The governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, condemning the shooting, calling it a brutal and inexcusable act of violence, and says he will be doubling down on state initiatives to restrict immigration, saying this cowardly attack will not impede our efforts. This is Greg Abbott here to secure the border, enforce immigration law, and ensure law and order. As for the sniper here, the suspected shooter, he has been named as 29-year-old Joshua Jan. Records show that his parents live in Fairview in Collin County, though they have an address in Oklahoma as well, so they're still trying to narrow down where he was living in recent months. He only has one major item on his criminal record. Back in 2016, he was charged with delivering marijuana in an amount greater than a quarter ounce, but less than 5 pounds, which is a felony in Texas. He pleaded guilty to that. But beyond that, not much of a record here, Jill. As you noted, his brother spoke out. NBC got an interview with him. And his older brother, Noah, says, I didn't think my brother had strong feelings at all about ICE. He did describe his brother as, quote, unique without elaborating, but said he didn't think his brother would ever be motivated by politics. He didn't think that the family didn't believe him to be very politically interested, at least the people who have spoken out so far. The shooter here was a registered independent, last voted in the November election. Grew up in Allen, Texas, where they were Boy Scouts. The suspect here had done coding work, but was currently unemployed. And the brother says of the shooter that the family owned a rifle and the brother knew how to use it, but he was not an excellent marksman and the brother doesn't believe, would have been able to make shots like that from the rooftop, where he was effectively able to wound at least 2 critically and kill somebody. And as recently as 2 weeks ago, the brothers were together, and he says he didn't suspect anything out of the ordinary. So we will look to learn more here about this shooter.
All right, former FBI Director James Comey is expected to potentially be indicted on criminal charges in the coming days in federal court in Virginia. This is according to MSNBC sources. While the full extent of the charges being prepared against Comey is unclear, given that the feds have multiple investigations ongoing, sources believe that at least one element of the indictment, if it is to go forward, will accuse him of lying to Congress during his testimony on September 30th, 2020. So that date is key because any charges related to lying to Congress have a 5-year statute of limitations. That statute runs out this upcoming Tuesday, September 30th, hence the apparent rush from the Trump administration. At issue is how Comey answered questions before Congress about an FBI leak. The news of the potential prosecution comes just days after the top prosecutor in the Eastern District of Virginia resigned under pressure from President Trump. That prosecutor opposed filing charges against Comey, believing that they have a weak case. Trump then replaced the previous prosecutor with Lindsay Halligan. She is a loyal White House advisor and former Trump defense attorney. She has no prosecutorial experience. She was tapped as the interim U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia this week.
Yeah, so this is not completely finalized here, but we started to see all these reports pop up on Wednesday afternoon related to a Comey indictment here. And it comes just days after Halligan was put in when the previous prosecutor was like, there's nothing to do here, Mr. President. That's not something Trump wanted to hear. We reported earlier this week on Trump's social media posts over the weekend and his comments saying, DOJ, get on this. I want you to look into my political enemies and prosecute them quickly. Now, James Comey has been a target of Trump's wrath for a very long time. But it wasn't just Trump, Jill. He's also been the target of the wrath from the left. Remember back in 2016, he was the guy who was investigating Hillary Clinton and her email servers during the 2016 election, her private server, eventually chooses not to charge her. But remember, the Hillary Clinton folks and a whole bunch of Democrats blame Comey for the loss in 2016 to Donald Trump. Well, that didn't win him that many favors with Donald Trump. Donald Trump very quickly thereafter fired James Comey and has effectively pursued an 8-year vendetta against the former FBI director, blaming him for the other investigation in 2016 into Russian election interference. The president, of course, has called that for years a witch hunt that was meant to hobble his presidency. And so Trump then fired Comey when he got into office in 2017, leading to the appointment of a special counsel, Bob Mueller, and the whole Mueller investigation. So Trump for years sees Comey as one of the major problems in his life and said over the weekend in a social media post that Comey is, quote, guilty as hell. And he addressed that social media post to Pam Bondi, the attorney general, openly saying, please do something about this, Pam Bondi. Now, you mentioned, Jill, the testimony that's in question here. We don't know about the full charges here or what the grand jury is going to come back with in terms of what they're going to indict him with, if at all. But the testimony we're looking at back in 2020 is related to Comey saying before Congress that he could not recall an intelligence document from 2016. So this is 2020 testimony about a 2016 document. Republicans claim the document showed the investigation of Russian election interference under Comey's leadership had been engineered by the Clinton campaign. at the congressional hearing in 2020, he was asked about whether he had underlings of the FBI leak that document, and Comey said he had not authorized the conduct. So it's not clear here what evidence they're going to show that disproves that. But remember, again, Trump has a new prosecutor in charge in the Eastern District in Virginia. He's been putting a lot of pressure on the Justice Department here. His post over the weekend said, "We can't delay any longer. They impeached me twice. They indicted me 5 times over nothing," all caps. "Justice must be served now!" 3 exclamation points he put on that over the weekend. And so, Jill, one question I got was like, okay, well, have we seen this before? This is the typical question we get here at Mo News. I will say this. Have we seen politically oriented prosecutions? Sure. Like, you could make the argument, and certainly even some Democrats did, that, like, for example, Alvin Bragg's prosecution on the Stormy Daniels documents against Trump, one of the several indictments Trump faced, you probably wouldn't have seen that against anybody else if the person wasn't named Donald Trump. At the same time, have we seen it where a president is explicitly and openly calling on the Attorney General, the chief legal officer of the United States, to prosecute people he does not like or who, made life difficult for him? No, we have not seen that. We learned subsequently that Nixon did that behind the scenes, but an openly politicized DOJ, Attorney General, presidential relationship is not something we've seen in the past. There's no evidence that Biden did that privately or publicly, though, again, we did see individual Democrats try to prosecute Trump on various charges, but not, at least again, we don't have evidence at the direction of the president. This is something new we're seeing here, Jill, and it'll be very interesting to see whether the indictment actually goes down and what comes of it, especially given that we've seen multiple resignations and departures recently from longtime conservative legal experts and prosecutors who are like, I'm a conservative, but there's not enough here to prosecute. So it's a story we'll keep watching.
Time for the speed read from the Associated Press. Let's start back at the United Nations, where China made some major news on Wednesday. At the UN High-Level Climate Summit, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced that China would aim to cut emissions by 7 to 10% by 2035. China spews more than 31% of the world's carbon dioxide emissions, by far the most in the world. And the numbers have been going up over the decades. This announcement came as more than 100 world leaders gathered to talk about the increased urgency and need for stronger efforts to curb these heat-trapping gases. There are major international climate negotiations in Brazil about 6.5 weeks from now. So the UN convened a special leaders summit Wednesday during the General Assembly to focus on specific plans to cut emissions from coal, oil, and natural gas. Europe then followed with a less detailed and not quite official new climate change fighting plan. They have been particularly aggressive in recent years. Emissions in Europe are down nearly 40% since 1940. Xi and Brazil's leader also taking swipes at the United States and President Trump, who we told you yesterday attacked the idea of climate change in his speech, calling it a great con job.
Yeah, the Chinese leader not saying Trump's name yesterday, but clearly indicating he was talking about the U.S. when he said, while some countries are acting against it, the international community should stay focused on the right direction here. A note that the U.S. is the world's second largest polluter behind China. And actually, based on our population, which is about a quarter of the Chinese population, we put out more pollution per person than any other country in the world. So per capita, we're the largest polluter. But overall, China's the largest polluter. The Brazilian president, who's hosting the upcoming climate conference in just a few weeks here, said no one is safe from the effects of climate change. Walls at borders will not stop droughts or storms. Nature does not bow down to bombs or warships. No country stands above another. Again, not saying the U.S., not saying Donald Trump, but clearly indicating the U.S., adding, this is Lula of Brazil, all of us may lose because denialism may actually win. What's interesting here, Jill, a number of the countries most impacted by climate change are the ones that pollute the least. We're talking about the Pacific Islands out there. We're hearing more and more about what's called climate refugees, that in the coming decades, there are countries that exist in the Pacific that with rising oceans will no longer exist. And a number of them are moving to Australia, New Zealand. Various countries are taking in refugees from these smaller island nations who put out the least amount of carbon pollution. Then you have larger countries like Pakistan. They spoke yesterday. They were talking about millions of people impacted across thousands of villages, tens of billions of dollars in damage, storms and flooding that they have not seen in the past. And they're seeing it with the frequency they have not seen in the past. So the UN is asking all countries for their 5-year plan. Everyone has to put out their 5-year climate plan so they can calculate how much warming we can expect based on what each country is doing and what their goal is in terms of cuts. Now, we will say, I have some good news for you, everybody. Before 2015, the world was on path for a global temperature increase of 4 degrees Celsius or just over 7 degrees Fahrenheit. But due to the climate pledges of the past decade and the work that's been done, that has been trimmed to 2.5 degrees Celsius, 4.7 degrees Fahrenheit in terms of an increase. That's the good news. The bad news is the goal was 1.5 degrees Celsius, not 2.5 degrees Celsius, or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit, not 4.7 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the cutoff which scientists are worried about, where you start to see this sort of domino effect of damage related to the increasing temperature. And again, while a couple degrees doesn't sound significant, as I tell you guys often, it's like a fever. Just a couple degrees up, tick up in your body, and suddenly everything starts to feel bad, even though it's only a couple degrees off. Earth is sort of like your body in that way.
Especially an adult, Moshe. I know if I have 100-degree fever, I'm done. I'm not getting out of bed. And, You're on your own for the podcast.
And what is that? 100-degree fever? That's 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. We've already surpassed that on Earth.
From the Mo News Instagram, explosions and drones rattled a flotilla of boats carrying activists and humanitarian aid en route to Gaza on Wednesday. The roughly 500 volunteers in a 50-boat convoy of small vessels say that their communications were intercepted in the last 24 hours. Members of the global Samud Flotilla say more than a dozen drones appeared over their vessels and detonations damaged some of the boats, although there are no injuries reported. The group is blaming Israel for the strikes. The flotilla also says its communication systems were jammed with ABBA songs. We do have a clip up of that on Instagram. The music likely meant to mock Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg, who is on board one of the vessels.
Get it, Sweden, ABBA, Greta.
The flotilla group saying in a statement, quote, "We are witnessing these psychological operations firsthand right now, but we will not be intimidated." The Israeli government repeatedly advised the group to peacefully drop off the aid at an Israeli port several miles from Gaza, which it says will then be taken to Gaza. But the activists are refusing the offer. They're insisting on trying to break the Israeli military blockade.
Yes, so you have the Israeli Foreign Ministry saying here that it will take, quote, "all necessary measures to prevent its entry into a combat zone," adding that the rejection here by the activists of the Israeli offer to drop off all the aid at the port of Ashkelon, which is just a couple miles north of Gaza, shows the insincerity of the flotilla members. But the flotilla says they believe that the Israeli blockade of Gaza is illegal, and so they are looking to break it with about 50 civilian boats, relatively small boats here, especially as compared to the Israeli Navy. Now, something we haven't seen with previous flotillas that we're seeing this time around, Jill, which will make it even more interesting to watch. The Italian Navy and the Spanish Navy are sending boats right now to help the flotilla members not necessarily sort of break through the Israeli blockade, at least that's not clear right now, but more serving as a first aid and rescue for flotilla members if these exploding drones continue to happen or continue to take place over the flotilla. They have made it to the Eastern Mediterranean. They left Spain about a month ago and just days away from potentially getting near the waters there in Gaza as they move through eastern Greece right now. So how far the Italian ship and the Spanish ship come, what the interactions are like there, and how the Israelis deal with not just like one boat, which is what they dealt with in June with Greta Thunberg and company when they arrested them and deported them. By the way, they told all of them, they made them sign an agreement that they would never come back. They're back now. So how the Israelis deal with this group, especially since it's 50 boats with several hundred people, will be something we'll watch very closely. The Israelis, again, saying it's a war zone. We're not letting you into Gaza. But if you want to give aid, we're happy to take it and make it part of our daily shipment.
To some health news now from CNN. Chagas disease, or kissing bug disease, a potentially deadly condition caused by a parasite carried by insects called kissing bugs, should now be considered endemic in the United States. The CDC's journal, Emerging Infectious Diseases, put a new report out about it. They're really trying to raise awareness about the disease. The World Health Organization considers Chagas a neglected tropical disease, but it is actually one of the leading causes of heart disease in Latin America, and it causes more disability than other more well-known insect-borne infections, even more than malaria and Zika, according to studies. So Chagas largely spreads when triatomine bugs, more commonly known as kissing bugs, bite a human, usually while they're sleeping at night. Early symptoms can include fever, body aches, headaches, rash, vomiting, and tiredness, and they may last weeks or even months after the initial infection. But the concern, Moshe, is the longer-term impacts.
Yeah, and that's the issue here is about a quarter to a third of people who've been infected develop a more serious problem, like long-term digestive issues, nervous system conditions, heart failure, stroke, or even death in very rare cases. If it's caught early, the disease can be cured by a couple medications that kill parasites, but the drugs become less effective the longer the person has been infected with the disease, and most people are pretty unaware that they have the disease. A new report finds that many doctors don't even look for it in patients in the U.S. Surveillance is pretty limited. The CDC estimates that just under 300,000 people in the U.S. have Chagas at any given time, though it's unclear how many have the more serious form of the disease or how many deaths even are caused by Chagas every year. They have found these bugs now in about 32 states. They mostly live in warmer southern states, but with climate change causing more bug-friendly temperatures, there is a good chance they have spread further into sort of the mid-Atlantic and plain states in recent years.
From CNBC, Labubu dolls have emerged as a must-have accessory in luxury fashion, with celebs like Blackpink's Lisa pairing the toys with Louis Vuitton and Hermes bags. The collectible plush is relatively inexpensive, just $27. They look kind of like rabbit-esque monsters with jagged teeth, but they routinely sell at a premium on the resale market. Now, though, you've got high-end brands testing whether Labubu fans are willing to pay luxury price points. Back in June, a collection of 14 customized Labubus dressed in designs by Carhartt went for as much as $30,000 for one. And at the recent U.S. Open, tennis champ Naomi Osaka, she had a crystal-encrusted Labubu that cost about $500. In just over 2 weeks, there is a Parisian fashion house releasing a collection of handbags, leather accessories, and bag charms that feature Labubus. Moynat's signature monogrammed canvas totes start at more than $2,000, and those bag charms are going to sell for about $450.
Jill, is that what I should get you for the holidays? A Moynat Labubu?
Not me, but if you want to be my daughter's best friend, you can go ahead and get her one.
So you have some high-end brands here, from Tiffany to Loewe, increasingly featuring characters like Pikachu and others to court more young and digitally savvy customers. And not only are they getting hype for these brands, but they are paying off. Omega's silver Snoopy Speedmaster watches are already coveted collector's items, I'm reading here. There was a model that was priced at about $7,300. That's now worth $38,000 on the secondary market. Jimmy Choo has some collections with Sailor Moon that were quickly sold out. The collaboration's picking up popularity over the last 10 years or so among some target customers who can afford high-end items but are not fashion obsessed. And Gen Z customers in particular, according to analysts, are looking for emotional value. Many have pulled back their spending as they have felt the effect of inflation and see less value in traditional luxury goods, but like these sort of specialty items.
And finally, Moshe, some sports news from the Associated Press. Robot umpires are getting called up to the big leagues next season. Major League Baseball's 11-man competition committee this week approved use of the automated ball strike system in the major leagues starting in 2026. Human plate umpires will still call balls and strikes, but teams will be able to challenge 2 calls per game and then get an additional appeals if there are extra innings. Challenges must be made by a pitcher, catcher, or batter, signaled by tapping their helmet or cap. And if the challenge is successful, the team keeps its challenge. Reviews will be shown as digital graphics on outfield video boards. New York Yankees outfielder Austin Slater is one of 4 players who's on the competition committee. So he says 3 voted in favor after getting support from 22 of the 30 teams. All 6 management reps voted in favor of it. Slater says, I think it's just coming to grips with the impact that technology is going to have and whether or not we are willing to live with that error that was associated with the system, even if the error is very, very minuscule. Big league umpires, by the way, call roughly 94% of pitches correctly, according to some data.
Adding the robot umps here, they believe will also cut down on ejections. About 2/3 of ejections, including players, managers, and coaches, last year were related to balls and strikes. You guys have seen those fights if you ever have watched a game or been at the ballpark. You're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about, ump. You can't really yell at the robot. I mean, you could yell at the robot. They might kick. I mean, they might do some damage to the robots. We'll see. We'll see how that goes as they take their wrath out next year on a robot and not a human. This is sort of inevitable here. Jill, I was recently at a Savannah Bananas game, which is that fun sort of alternate Harlem Globetrotters-esque baseball team. Saw one of the recent games at Yankee Stadium, and they had a lot of fun things going on there. And I do think that MLB, Major League Baseball, which still has the oldest fan base among the major sports, is going to continue to have to make some changes along the lengths of what the Savannah Bananas are doing, but also sort of incorporating technology here to get a younger crowd into baseball, especially even with the clock these days. Still a super long game to watch. All right, now time for On This Day in History. On this day in 1789, the first U.S. Congress adopts the amendments that become known as the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. Probably more well-known than the Constitution itself, frankly. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. Those top 10.
The big ones, the big freedoms.
The big ones, the biggies we cherish here in the U.S. On this day in 1978, some major legal history for female sports reporters.
Tell me everything.
As of the late 70s, female reporters were not allowed inside the locker room. Enter Melissa Lutke. She's a writer for Sports Illustrated. The year is 1977. She was denied access to the New York Yankees clubhouse during the 77 World Series. Well, a year later, on this day in 1978, she files a suit in U.S. District Court, which she eventually wins, allowing female writers to access Major League Baseball locker rooms after the games. Of course, when you watch sports today, female reporters, sideline reporters, locker room reporters, commonplace. On this day in 1981, another significant date for women in the U.S., Sandra Day O'Connor becomes the first woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. And then in a bit of entertainment news here, on this day in 2001, XM Satellite Radio was launched. So XM Satellite Radio, officially 24 years old today. And you guys knew the theme song at the top of the show. Turning 57 years old today, Will Smith. Born in West Philadelphia, on the playground is where he spent most of his days before he becomes famous with DJ Jazzy Jeff, The Fresh Prince. Anyway, The Fresh Prince, everybody, 57 years old today.
With hits, Moshe, that really defined my childhood, like Parents Just Don't Understand, Summertime, and then even later on, Welcome to Miami. He had some bangers.
Until it gets to like Wild Wild West, which was like, it was one of those songs on the radio, but like didn't quite do it for me like those previous songs.
There was nothing quite like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and the Parents Don't Understand music.
Summertime.
Yes.
Miami.
Those were it, yes.
Just the two of us. Will certainly contributed to the 1990s songbook.
And the 80s, Moshe. All right, everyone, that is a wrap. Thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you do not miss an episode, and review us in the App Store.
You can listen to Mo News in the app.